The Houston sun hammered down on the rooftop helipad at 2:47 p.m. Heat shimmered off the tempered glass observation deck where the skyline sat motionless. $90 million of custom engineering. Silent, grounded. A red warning light pulsed on the instrument panel. Blink, blink, blink. The digital clock on the building's facade ticked forward with mechanical precision. 2:47:18, 2:47:19, 2:47:20. Each second swallowed another fragment of Sophia Chen's carefully constructed timeline. Ray Mitchell stood beside the aircraft, sweat darkening the collar of his white maintenance uniform despite the shade. His iPad glowed with cascading error codes. He pressed the radio transmitter at his collar. "Status update," he said, his voice tight. "Diagnostic code 77, primary actuator communication fault. The replacement part is on a flight from Stuttgart." He paused, swallowing. "ETA 14 hours, ma'am." The silence that followed felt like pressure building behind a dam. Then Sophia Chen's voice cut through the radio. "Ice over steel. Marcus Thorne's jet touched down in Denver 30 minutes ago. He'll be sitting across from my acquisition target in 6 hours." Ray's hand tightened on the iPad. His knuckles went white. "Ma'am, we can't bypass the diagnostic. The system won't allow manual override without... I don't pay you to tell me what systems allow Ray. I pay you for solutions." Another beat of silence. The helicopter's warning light continued its rhythmic pulse. The city hummed below. Distant traffic. Construction. Life moving forward while everything here stood frozen. "Find me another option," Sophia continued. "I will not lose this deal because of a red light." The transmission cut off with a sharp click. Ray turned to his team of technicians. 3 men in pristine jumpsuits, their hands clean, their tablets glowing with 3-dimensional wireframe models of the aircraft's internal systems. They looked at each other. No one spoke. 40 yards away near the hangar entrance, a different kind of figure stood watching. Jack Porter wiped his hands on a faded red rag. His coveralls were stained with hydraulic fluid and aviation grease. The smell of honest work clung to him like a second skin. He was listening, not to the panicked conversation happening at the helicopter, to something else. A sound, faint, high frequency. A mechanical whine buried beneath the ambient noise of the rooftop. 12 hertz. He'd heard this frequency before, years ago, in a different life. His jaw tightened. Behind him, in a small cordoned safety area near the hangar door, his daughter Emma sat cross-legged on the concrete. 7 years old. Brown curls falling over her reading glasses. She was drawing in her sketchbook with methodical concentration. Jack glanced back at her, then at the wall clock mounted above the hangar entrance. 2:51 p.m. He closed his toolbox with a deliberate click. The sound echoed across the empty rooftop. He walked over to Emma and knelt beside her. "What you drawing, kiddo?" Emma didn't look up. Her crayon moved in careful strokes across the page. "The big bird on the roof." Jack tilted his head to see the sketch. The skyline. But something was wrong with it. Emma had drawn X's where the windows should be. And beneath the aircraft she'd drawn a crack. A jagged line splitting the foundation. "Why's the bird sad?" Jack asked quietly. Emma finally looked up at him. Her eyes were old for 7 years. "Because nobody's listening to it." Jack stared at the drawing. The crack beneath the helicopter. The X's for eyes. His daughter saw things, always had. He glanced back toward the helipad. Ray and his team were still clustered around their tablets, staring at screens instead of metal. The 12 hertz whine continued, faint but persistent. Nobody else heard it. Jack touched the broken watch on his wrist, the hands frozen at 3:47. He took a slow breath. Then he stood up and started walking toward the helicopter. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button. This is just the beginning. Jack made it 3 steps before Tommy intercepted him. "Hey, Porter." The young apprentice mechanic jogged over, wiping his hands on a rag identical to Jack's. 22 years old. Eager. Still believed that hard work and technical skill mattered more than titles. "You heading out already? It's not even 3. Jack stopped. His eyes stayed on the skyline, on Ray and his team of white uniforms. on the tablets that glowed brighter than common sense. "Yeah," Jack said quietly. "Early day." Tommy followed his gaze to the executive aircraft, to the flashing red light that everyone seemed determined to ignore. "That thing's been screaming all morning," Tommy said. "You hear it. I hear it. Sounds like frame resonance to me, but Ray says the diagnostic points to the actuator." Jack turned to look at the kid. Really look at him. "What do you think, Tommy?" The apprentice shifted his weight, uncomfortable, like he'd been asked to choose between what he knew and what he was supposed to say. "I think," Tommy hesitated, "I think the computer's looking at the wrong thing." Jack nodded once, short, definitive. "Then trust that," he said. "Always trust what you hear over what a screen tells you." He walked back toward the hangar entrance where Emma waited, away from the helicopter, away from the diagnostic equipment and the pristine uniforms and the 14-hour solution that wouldn't solve anything. Tommy watched him go, confused. Jack Porter never walked away from a problem. Everyone knew that. But Tommy didn't know what Jack knew. Didn't understand that some fights couldn't be won with logic and expertise. Some fights required authority, credentials, the right last name or the right degree framed on the right wall. Jack had none of those things anymore. He'd given them up 6 years ago. By choice. The hangar floor, 3 levels below, was a different world entirely. The rooftop was sterile glass and corporate anxiety. Down here, the air smelled like aviation fuel and hot metal and the burnt coffee dregs from the break room that nobody ever cleaned. This was where the real work happened. Jack's toolbox sat on his workbench. A gray Craftsman chest from 1987, dented, scarred. Every tool inside had a place, every wrench calibrated, every socket labeled with faded tape in Jack's precise handwriting. He opened his locker. 3 things hung inside. A photograph of Emma. First day of kindergarten, gap-toothed smile, backpack bigger than her torso. A photograph of a woman, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, sunglasses pushed up on her head. She was laughing at something off camera. Her face was turned slightly away, like she'd been caught mid-motion, mid-joy. Jennifer, and hanging from a hook a broken watch. Rose gold case. Leather band cracked and faded, the hands frozen at 3:47. Jack stared at it for a long moment. He didn't take it down. He never did. Just looked at it, reminded himself. Then he closed the locker and walked over to where Emma sat drawing. She'd added more details to her sketch. The helicopter now had tears falling from its exit-out eyes, and beneath it the crack had grown, spread, like roots seeking purchase in unstable ground. "Come on, baby," Jack said quietly. "Let's head home." Emma looked up at him. Those old eyes in that young face. "Did you fix the bird?" "Nobody asked me to, but you know how." Knowing how doesn't mean they want to hear it. Emma closed her sketchbook slowly. She stood and took his hand, her small fingers wrapped around 2 of his calloused ones. "That's dumb," she said matter-of-factly. Jack almost smiled. "Yeah, kiddo, it is." They walked toward the stairwell. The hangar stretched out behind them, massive, cathedral-like. Other mechanics worked on smaller aircraft. The sound of pneumatic tools and Spanish radio and someone singing badly to a song nobody else could hear. This was Jack's sanctuary. Not the executive suites, not the climate-controlled observation decks, not the glass towers where decisions got made by people who'd never touched a wrench. Here, where hands got dirty and metal told the truth, 40 floors above the hangar. Sophia Chen stood at the window of her executive office and watched the clock. 2:34. The office was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that felt manufactured. Artificial. Her entire workspace was designed to eliminate distraction. Soundproof glass. White noise generators. Air filtration that removed every trace of the city below. She hated it, but she'd built it, insisted on it, because distraction was weakness, and weakness was failure, and failure was something Sophia Chen did not permit. Her desk held nothing except a single manila folder and her Patek Philippe watch lying face up beside it. She never wore the watch while working, just kept it there. Visible. A reminder that time was the only resource that mattered. The wall behind her desk was all screens. Stock tickers scrolling, news feeds updating, a satellite map showing the real-time location of Marcus Thorne's private jet, still on the ground in Denver. But not for long. Her phone buzzed. She answered without looking at the caller ID. "Tell me something useful." "Miss Chen." Her assistant's voice was carefully neutral. Professional terror. "Captain Mills is requesting to speak with you. She says it's about safety protocol. Tell her I'll speak when we're airborne. She says it's urgent. Then tell her to follow standard procedure. That's why we have procedures." A pause on the other end. Her assistant knew better than to push back. "Yes, ma'am." Sophia ended the call. She turned back to the window. The helipad was visible from here. A small square of concrete jutting out from the building's edge. The skyline sitting there like an expensive paperweight. Ray and his team still clustered around it with their tablets. 14 hours. Unacceptable. She'd built Helios Aviation on speed, on being first, on arriving before the competition even knew the race had started. Her entire reputation was constructed on the principle that time could be bent, controlled, weaponized, and now a red light was telling her to wait. Her eyes shifted to a framed photograph on the windowsill. The only personal item in the entire office. Sophia. Younger, maybe 25. Standing beside an older Asian man, her father. They were both in formal business attire. Behind them, visible through the glass of whatever building they'd been photographed in, was the skyline. Brand new. Fresh from the manufacturer. Delivery day. Her father wasn't smiling in the photo. He never smiled. Just stood there with his arms crossed. Looking at the camera like it had personally disappointed him. Sophia was smiling in the picture. But it was wrong. Tight. The smile of someone trying very hard to appear happy. She turned away from the photograph. Time was slipping. Marcus Thorne was moving. The deal was evaporating with every tick of the clock. She pressed the intercom button on her desk. "Get Ray on the line, now." Jack's truck was a 2015 Ford F-150 with 140,000 miles and a dent in the passenger side door from when Emma had accidentally run her bicycle into it 3 years ago. He'd never fixed the dent, liked it. A reminder that some damage was worth keeping. Emma climbed into her car seat in the back. 7 years old, but still too small for a booster. Jack made sure the straps were secure, checked them twice, then a third time. "Daddy, I'm not going to float away." "I know, baby." But he checked the straps again anyway. He climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. The truck coughed, rattled, then settled into a reliable growl. Through the windshield he could see the top of the Helios building, the helipad barely visible from this angle. Just a sliver of concrete and the tail rotor of the skyline catching afternoon light. The 12 Hertz Weinschwein was still there, buried beneath city traffic and construction noise, and Emma humming to herself in the back seat. But Jack heard it, felt it, like an itch he couldn't scratch. His phone sat in the cup holder. Silent. Nobody was calling, nobody would call, because Jack Porter was a GS4 floor mechanic and GS4 floor mechanics didn't get consulted on executive aircraft failures. That was fine. That was the deal he'd made with himself 6 years ago. Stay low. Stay quiet. Stay present for Emma. Everything else was just noise. He put the truck in reverse. Emma's humming stopped. "Daddy." "Yeah, baby. The bird's really sad." Jack looked at her in the rearview mirror. She was staring out the window up at the building. At the helipad they couldn't actually see from here. "I know. he said quietly, "but you could make it happy." Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The leather was worn smooth, cracked in places. He'd driven this truck for 8 years, since before Jennifer died, since back when he'd been someone different, someone who fixed things, someone who mattered. Sometimes people don't want you to fix things, Em. Sometimes they want you to be quiet. Emma went back to humming. A song from school, something about birds and flying and freedom. Jack backed out of the parking space and pointed the truck toward home. 6 years ago, Jack Porter had been a different man with a different name. Dr. Elias Vance. Lead structural engineer. Project Ghost. Level 5 security clearance. He'd worked in a facility 2 hours north of Houston, a sprawling complex of laboratories and testing hangars and security checkpoints that required retinal scans and biometric verification and signatures in triplicate just to access the bathroom. The Ghost project was military, classified, a next-generation heavy-lift helicopter platform designed for high-altitude special operations, stealth capabilities, advanced avionics, frame construction that could withstand forces that would tear conventional aircraft apart. Jack had designed the frame, every stress point, every load calculation, every redundancy system. He'd been good at it, brilliant even. 3 patents to his name, 2 more pending, the kind of engineer who saw problems in dreams and woke up with solutions scribbled on notepads he kept beside the bed. Jennifer had hated the notepads. "You're supposed to be sleeping," she'd say, "not designing helicopters." But that was the job, that was the life. The 3 a.m. crisis calls, the missed anniversaries, the birthday parties he'd attended via video chat because he was stuck in a testing facility watching stress simulations. He'd told himself it was worth it, told himself he was building something important, told himself the sacrifice was temporary. Then came the phone call, February 14th, Valentine's Day. He'd been in a meeting, department heads and military liaisons discussing material specifications for the Ghost 4 prototype. Jack had been presenting, explaining why grade 5 titanium was non-negotiable for the primary frame mount. "It's 20% more expensive than grade 7, someone had said. A contractor, civilian, some guy in a suit who'd never touched a wrench. "Can we substitute no?" Jack had said. Simple, definitive. Grade 7 has a 30% lower shear tolerance and a critical thermal expansion coefficient at operational temperatures. It will fail. It's not a question of if, it's when. The contractor had written something down, nodded, moved on. Jack's phone had started vibrating in his pocket halfway through the next slide. He'd ignored it. It vibrated again and again. He'd excused himself, stepped into the hallway, answered. Dr. Vance, a voice he didn't recognize, official, careful. "This is he. This is County Medical. There's been an accident. Your wife was on Transport 47. I'm very sorry, but..." The rest of the words had dissolved into static. Jack had stood there in the fluorescent hallway with the phone pressed to his ear and the sound of his own breathing suddenly too loud, too fast. What happened, he'd managed. Structural failure. At 18,000 feet, the aircraft went down in a field north of the city. There were no survivors. Jack had ended the call, stood there. The hallway lights hummed overhead. Somewhere behind the closed conference room door, his presentation continued without him. Someone else explaining load tolerances and stress coefficients and all the careful mathematics that were supposed to keep people safe. He'd gone home that night. Emma had been 14 months old, asleep in her crib, unaware that the world had just collapsed. Jack had sat in the nursery until dawn, watching her breathe, listening to the small sounds she made in her sleep, wondering how he was supposed to explain this to her when she got old enough to ask where her mother went. The investigation took 3 months. Jack had been granted access to the final report because of his security clearance. A manila folder, 40 pages, dense technical language and failure analysis and reconstructed flight data. Page 17 had the answer. Material substitution. The transport company had replaced the specified grade 5 titanium frame mount with grade 7 Chinese titanium. Cost savings of 2.1%. Margin improvement for shareholders. The frame had failed at altitude, thermal stress, molecular shear. Exactly the failure mode Jack had described in a dozen military briefings. They'd known. Someone had known. And they'd used the cheaper alloy anyway. Jennifer had died because a contractor wanted to save 2%. Jack had stood in his kitchen reading that report, Emma playing with blocks on the floor behind him. Sunlight streaming through the windows. Everything normal, everything fine. Except nothing would ever be fine again. He'd resigned the next day, walked into his supervisor's office, placed his badge on the desk, said nothing. "Elias, you're one of the best engineers we have. Whatever you're going through, we can work with you. Medical leave, counseling, whatever you need." Jack had just looked at him. "I write specifications," he'd said quietly. "Perfect specifications. And the civilian world ignores them because it's cheaper. My wife is dead because someone decided 2% profit was worth more than her life. That's not on you. It's on everyone. The system is broken, and I can't be part of it anymore." He'd walked out, deleted his professional email, changed his name back to Porter, taken his daughter and moved to Houston, found a job as a floor mechanic. Entry level, GS4. The kind of work where you got your hands dirty and nobody asked about your credentials because credentials didn't matter. Only the metal mattered, only the truth mattered. And Jack had decided he'd rather be someone who knew the truth than someone who designed systems the world would ignore. Emma had been too young to understand. But she'd understood that Daddy was home now, every day. 3:15. Reliable as clockwork. That was the exchange. His career for her childhood. His reputation for her security. And he'd never regretted it. Not once. Not until today. The confrontation on the helipad happened at 3:04 p.m. Jack had made it all the way to the stairwell, Emma's hand in his, the truck waiting in the parking lot below. Home just 20 minutes away. Then he'd stopped, turned around, looked back at the skyline sitting there with its red warning light pulsing in the afternoon sun. "Daddy," Emma had said. "What's wrong?" Jack had knelt down to her level. "Baby, I need you to do something for me. Okay? I need you to sit right here on this step, and don't move until I come back." Emma had looked at him with those two old eyes. "You're going to help the bird." "I'm going to try. They won't listen." Jack had smiled, sad and small. "Maybe, but I have to try anyway." He'd kissed her forehead, then stood and walked back across the rooftop toward the cluster of white uniforms and glowing tablets. Ray saw him coming. His expression shifted from concentration to annoyance. "Porter, you're off clock." Jack stopped 10 feet from the skyline, close enough to hear it. The 12 hertz resonance was louder now, more insistent. The kind of sound that meant time was running out. "It's not the actuator," Jack said. Ray didn't look up from his iPad. "The diagnostic says actuator. Multiple redundant systems confirm actuator. We follow the diagnostic. The diagnostic is wrong." Now Ray looked up. His face was red, overheated, exhausted from corporate pressure and impossible timelines. "You're a floor mechanic, Porter. This is executive-level maintenance. We have protocols." "I can hear it," Jack said quietly. 12 hertz. That's not electrical failure. That's frame resonance. The mount is flexing under thermal load. One of the other technicians glanced at Jack, young, uncertain. Like he wanted to believe but didn't dare. Ray's jaw tightened. We have a 14-hour solution in place. The part is already in transit. Your input is not required. In 14 hours, that frame mount is going to crack completely. When it does, the actuator will be the least of your problems. Security, Ray barked. 2 guards started walking toward Jack from the building entrance. Jack didn't move, just looked at Ray, then at the helicopter, then back at Ray. Give me 5 minutes. I can verify the failure point. Confirm what's actually wrong. You don't have clearance to touch this aircraft. I don't need to touch it, I just need to listen. Captain Sarah Mills emerged from the cockpit. She was 45, former Navy. The kind of pilot who'd flown combat missions in 3 different theaters and had exactly 0 tolerance for bullshit. She looked at Jack, then at Ray, then at the flashing warning light on her instrument panel. "What's the mechanic saying?" Mills asked. Ray's face went redder. "Nothing relevant, Captain. He's overstepping his authority." Mills walked over to Jack, looked him in the eye. "You heard something?" "Yes, ma'am. Thermal stress fracture. Primary frame mount. The actuator is compensating for structural displacement. That's why the diagnostic reads it as actuator failure. The computer can't see the real problem because it's looking at the wrong system." Mills studied him for a long moment. "Why isn't this being investigated?" she asked Ray. "Because we follow protocol, Captain, and the protocol says we trust the diagnostic system. The protocol also says we ground any aircraft with unresolved warning lights. Ms. Chen has authorized a manual override and system reboot. We'll clear the error and proceed with departure." Mills's expression went cold. "You're going to reboot the system while there's an active structural warning. The diagnostic confirms it's an electrical fault, not structural. And if the diagnostic is wrong..." Ray opened his mouth, closed it, had no answer. The glass door from the executive level opened. Sophia Chen stepped onto the helipad. She moved like someone who'd never been told no, never been denied, never been forced to wait. The afternoon sun caught her dark hair. Her suit was gray, expensive, the kind of tailoring that cost more than Jack made in a month. Her heels clicked against the concrete with sharp, precise rhythm. She looked at Mills, at Ray, at the cluster of technicians. Then her eyes landed on Jack. He was the only person on the rooftop who didn't straighten up when she arrived, didn't shift his posture or arrange his face into an expression of deference. He just stood there, grease on his coveralls, red rag hanging from his pocket, hands that had fixed 1,000 machines and designed 100 more. "What's the delay?" Sophia asked. Her voice was controlled, but underneath Jack heard the edge, the barely contained fury of someone watching time slip away. Ray stepped forward. "No delay, Ms. Chen. We're implementing the manual override now. You'll be airborne in 10 minutes. Sophia's eyes stayed on Jack. "Who are you?" "Jack Porter, ma'am. Floor mechanic." "And why are you standing near my helicopter instead of doing your job?" Jack held her gaze. "Because your helicopter is about to fail catastrophically and nobody's listening." The rooftop went silent. Even the city noise seemed to pause, waiting. Sophia tilted her head slightly, studying him. "The diagnostic says actuator failure. My head of maintenance says we have a solution in place. My pilot says we're grounded until the part arrives. What do you say?" "I say the diagnostic is wrong. The actuator is fine. Your frame mount has a thermal stress fracture. It's a 200 micrometer displacement, invisible to the naked eye. But at operational temperature and RPM, it'll pull the entire primary drive assembly out of tolerance. Best case, you lose power at altitude. Worst case, the frame cracks and the rotor tears itself apart. And Sophia's expression didn't change. You can determine this by looking, no ma'am, by listening. To what? To the metal. Sophia glanced at Ray, at his iPad and his diagnostic trees and his 14-hour solution, then back at Jack. Mr. Porter, I appreciate initiative, but I have certified technicians. I have million-dollar diagnostic equipment. I have a 14-hour timeline already in motion. What I don't have is time for guesswork. It's not a guess. Do you have certification to work on executive aircraft? Jack paused. No, ma'am. Then I'll trust the people who do. She turned to Ray. Clear the error. We lift off in 10 minutes. Ray nodded, relief washing over his face. Mills stepped forward. Ms. Chen, if there's any doubt about structural integrity. There's always doubt, Captain. That's what insurance is for. I need to be in Denver by 8 p.m. Make it happen. Sophia walked back toward the building entrance. Her heels clicked. Confident. Final. Jack watched her go. Emma was waiting in the stairwell, watching through the glass door, her small face pressed against the window. The security guards reached Jack. Sir, you need to leave the helipad. Jack looked at the skyline one more time. At the warning light still flashing. At Ray already typing commands into his iPad. At the metal that was screaming and nobody could hear. He turned and walked back toward the stairwell. Toward his daughter. Toward home and safety and the small predictable world he'd built for himself. The world where he didn't have to watch people make fatal mistakes because they valued credentials over truth. Emma took his hand when he reached her. They didn't listen, she said quietly. No, baby, they didn't. They started down the stairs together. Behind them, Ray initiated the system reboot. And somewhere deep in the skyline's frame, a crack that had been growing for months began to spread. The stairwell was concrete and fluorescent light and the echo of their footsteps descending. Jack held Emma's hand. She was quiet, processing, the way children do when they sense something wrong but can't name it yet. Daddy, yeah, baby, is the bird going to be okay? Jack stopped on the landing between floors, looked down at his daughter, those brown eyes watching him, trusting him to tell the truth. He'd never lied to her, not when she'd asked where Mommy went, not when she'd asked why they didn't live in the big house anymore, not when she'd asked why Daddy's hands were always dirty now. He wouldn't start lying today. I don't know, Em. Emma squeezed his hand tighter. But you could fix it, right? Jack knelt down. Eye level with her, the stairwell stretched above and below them. Empty, just the two of them and the hum of building ventilation and the distant sound of the city. Sometimes people don't want you to fix things, baby. They want you to be quiet. Emma frowned, that little crease between her eyebrows that looked exactly like Jennifer's. That's dumb. Jack smiled, sad and true. Yeah, kiddo, it is. He stood up. They continued down. Floor 38, 37, 36. Daddy, what if they're wrong? Jack's footsteps slowed. Emma's question hung in the air between them. Simple, devastating. What if they're wrong? He looked up through the stairwell, through the industrial metal and concrete and all the floors between here and the rooftop. Somewhere up there, Ray was typing commands into an iPad. Somewhere up there, Sophia Chen was checking her watch and calculating margins and making decisions based on spreadsheets instead of sound. Somewhere up there, a helicopter was screaming and nobody was listening. Jack's hand tightened on the railing. Then people get hurt, he said quietly. They reached the ground floor. Jack pushed open the heavy door, sunlight and heat in the parking lot stretching out before them. His truck sat in its usual spot. Dented door, faded paint, reliable. He walked Emma to the passenger side, opened the door, lifted her into her car seat. Arms up. She raised her arms. He pulled the straps over her shoulders, checked them once, twice, 3 times. Daddy, I'm not going to fall out. I know. But he checked them again anyway. Through the windshield, he could see the top of the Helios building. The helipad barely visible. Just a suggestion of concrete and rotor blades against the sky. The 12 hertz whine was still there. Fainter now, distance and concrete muffling it. But Jack's ears were trained, tuned. He could hear what others couldn't. That's what happened when you spent 20 years listening to metal. It talked to you, told you its secrets, warned you when something was wrong. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine. The truck coughed, settled, waited. Emma was humming in the back seat. Some song from school. Something about clouds and flying in dreams. Jack put his hand on the gear shift, looked up at the building one more time. Removed his hand from the gear shift. He sat there. Engine idling. Air conditioning blowing hot air that would eventually turn cold. His phone in the cup holder. Silent. No one was going to call. No one needed a GS4 floor mechanic's opinion on executive aircraft maintenance. That was fine. That was the deal. Stay low. Stay quiet. Stay present. Emma stopped humming. Daddy, why aren't we leaving? Jack looked at her in the rearview mirror. Just thinking, baby. About the bird. Yeah, you should help it. They don't want my help. Emma went quiet for a moment. Then, Mommy would want you to help. Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The leather cracked. Worn. 8 years of driving this truck. 8 years of being someone different than who he used to be. How do you know that? He asked softly. Emma looked down at her lap, at her hands, at the broken watch Jack had given her to hold earlier. She'd been carrying it the whole time. She held it up so he could see it in the mirror. Because she gave you this to remember to save people, not to remember being scared. Jack stared at the watch. The hands frozen at 3:47. The moment Jennifer's world had ended. The moment his old life had died. He'd carried that watch for 6 years. Wore it every day. Let it remind him why he'd walked away, why he'd chosen Emma over engineering, why he'd chosen presence over prestige. But Emma saw it differently. She saw it as permission, not a prison. His phone buzzed. On the helipad, Ray Mitchell typed the final command sequence. His fingers were shaking, not from fear, from pressure. The weight of Sophia Chen's expectations pressing down on him like atmospheric force at altitude. He'd worked for Helios Aviation for 12 years, survived 3 corporate restructures, outlasted 7 department heads. He'd done it by following one simple rule: trust the system. The diagnostic equipment was worth more than his annual salary, designed by engineers with PhDs from MIT and Stanford, tested on thousands of aircraft, proven reliable. One floor mechanic with dirty hands and no certification wasn't going to override 12 years of protocol. Ray hit execute. The screen flashed, manual diagnostic override initiated. Recalibrating primary systems. The skyline's warning light flickered. Red, red, yellow. Ray exhaled. "See," he said to the technician standing behind him. "Software glitch, just like I thought." The yellow light blinked twice. Then the helicopter shuddered. Small, barely noticeable. The kind of vibration you might dismiss as wind or engine startup or nothing at all. But Captain Sarah Mills was still in the cockpit, still watching her instruments, still trusting her 20 years of flight experience over any diagnostic system ever built. She felt the shudder through her seat, felt it in her bones. "Ray," she said over the radio. Her voice was calm, controlled, the kind of calm that meant something was very wrong. "I'm reading increased vibration, primary drive assembly." Ray looked at his iPad. The diagnostic trees were updating, green lights cascading down the screen, system after system reporting nominal. "Negative, Captain. All systems are reading green. It's just the recalibration sequence." The helicopter shuddered again, harder this time. Mills looked at her instrument panel. The vibration gauge was climbing. Slowly, steadily, 12 hertz, 14 hertz, 16 hertz. Ray shut down the reboot. "Now." "Captain, the system is in the middle of a recalibration. If we interrupt it, we'll have to start over." "I said, shut it down." Ray's finger hovered over the iPad. He looked at the building entrance. At the glass door where Sophia Chen had disappeared minutes ago. 14 hours. Marcus Thorne in Denver. $50 billion slipping away with every second. "Captain, I assure you the system is functioning correctly." The diagnostic confirms. The skyline lurched. Not a shudder. A violent shake. Metal screaming against metal. The sound that Jack Porter had heard from 40 yards away. The sound that Ray Mitchell, surrounded by technology and protocol and the illusion of control, had never learned to recognize. The rotor head was wobbling, oscillating, fighting itself. "Abort the reboot," Mills shouted. "Ray, shut it down." Ray's hands flew across the iPad, typing, canceling, pulling up emergency protocols. Nothing responded. The screen flashed, system locked. Recalibration in progress. Manual override unavailable. "It won't stop," Ray said. His voice had gone thin, high, panic creeping in around the edges. "The system's locked into the sequence." "Then pull the main power. If I pull main power during recalibration, we could damage." "Pull it." But Ray was frozen, staring at his screen, at the green lights that kept telling him everything was fine while the helicopter tore itself apart 10 feet away. The other technicians were backing away, professional instinct overriding corporate loyalty. When metal started screaming, you moved. The skyline's rotor head was shaking so violently now it blurred. A circle of violence spinning faster and faster. Bolts straining, metal fatiguing, the entire aircraft vibrating like it was trying to shake itself free of the laws of physics. A bolt popped, shot out of the rotor assembly like a bullet, pinged against the concrete 20 feet away. Another bolt. Another. The sound like gunfire. Mills threw open the cockpit door and jumped out. Ran. Got clear of the rotor radius. "Everyone back," she screamed. "Get away from the aircraft." The technicians scattered. Ray stood there, iPad in hand, still trying to input commands, still believing the system could fix this, still trusting the green lights over the evidence of his own eyes. "Ray." Mills grabbed his arm, pulled him. "Move." The glass door from the executive level slammed open. Sophia Chen ran onto the helipad, her heels skidding on the concrete, her hair coming loose from its perfect arrangement. For the first time since she'd founded this company, she looked genuinely afraid. "What's happening?" Mills turned to her, face grim. "The aircraft is experiencing catastrophic structural failure. We have maybe 90 seconds before critical damage." Sophia stared at the skyline, at her $90 million helicopter shaking itself to death, at the rotor head that looked like it might tear free and slice through everything in a 30-foot radius. "Can you stop it? Not from here. We need mechanical intervention." Sophia's mind was racing. She could see it, the calculations, the options, the narrowing window of possibility. How do we need someone who understands the frame assembly, who can manually adjust the stress points, who can... Mills stopped, looked at Sophia. Sophia's face went white. Where's the mechanic? Mills pointed at the stairwell entrance. You sent him away. For one terrible moment, Sophia Chen, CEO and founder of Helios Aviation's self-made billionaire woman, who'd built an empire on speed and certainty and never accepting no, stood completely still. The helicopter screamed, the rotor head wobbled. A crack appeared in the frame mount. Hairline spreading. Sophia ran for the stairwell door. Jack's phone was buzzing. Unknown number. He stared at it. The truck was still idling. Emma was still humming in the back seat. The world was still normal. Except for the phone. Buzzing, insistent. He picked it up. Porter. This is Sophia Chen. Her voice was different. Stripped, no polish, no control, just raw fear barely contained. My helicopter is failing. We can't stop it. I need your help. Jack closed his eyes, opened them. I told you, frame mount, thermal stress. I know. Her breath was short, fast, like she'd been running. I know you did. Please. Through the phone, Jack could hear it. The screaming metal, the klaxons, people shouting, the sound of a machine dying. How much time? He asked. Captain Mills estimates 90 seconds, maybe less. Jack looked at Emma in the rearview mirror. She was watching him, still holding his broken watch, still believing that her father could fix anything if he just tried. He made a decision. I need direct access. No security, no Ray, no one questioning my authority. Whatever you need. And Emma stays in the executive lounge, air conditioning, water, paper and crayons. Someone watches her. Done. Jack, please. I'm coming. He ended the call. Looked at Emma. Baby, change of plans. You want to see inside the fancy building? Emma's eyes went wide. You're going to help the bird. I'm going to try. Will it work? Jack opened his door, came around, unbuckled her from the car seat, lifted her out. I don't know, but we're going to find out. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck. He could feel her heart beating, fast, excited, scared, trusting. They walked towards the building entrance, toward the elevators, toward the rooftop where metal was screaming and time was running out and everything Jack Porter had walked away from 6 years ago was waiting for him. The glass doors slid open. Inside, Sophia Chen was there, waiting, her perfect composure completely shattered, sweat on her forehead, hair falling, heels in her hand because she'd been running and finally realized that shoes didn't matter when people were about to die. She looked at Jack, then at Emma. Thank you, she said. Simple, honest. Jack nodded once. Sophia knelt down in front of Emma, made herself small, made herself human. Hi, sweetheart. What's your name? Emma. Emma, I'm Sophia. I'm going to take you somewhere safe while your daddy fixes something very important. Is that okay? Emma looked at Jack. He nodded. Okay, Emma said quietly. Sophia stood, pressed the elevator button. The doors opened immediately. 5th floor, she said to Jack. Executive lounge, climate controlled, full kitchen, art supplies in the conference room. She looked at Emma again. Do you like to draw? Yes. Good. I have the best crayons in the whole building. The three of them got in the elevator. It rose fast, smooth, silent, except for the mechanical hum and the distant sound of klaxons bleeding through the building's ventilation system. The elevator stopped at 5. Doors opened. A woman in business casual was waiting there. Sophia's assistant. She looked confused, terrified. like the entire world had tilted sideways and nobody had explained why. "Jennifer," Sophia said. "This is Emma. She's going to stay in the lounge. Get her whatever she needs. Water, snacks, art supplies. Do not leave her alone. Understand?" The assistant nodded, still confused, but taking orders because that's what you did when Sophia Chen used that tone. Emma looked back at Jack as the assistant led her away. "Daddy, I'll be right back, baby. Promise." The elevator doors closed. Now it was just Jack and Sophia, rising toward the rooftop, toward the catastrophe. Sophia was staring at the floor numbers ticking upward. Her hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists to hide it. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "You told me, and I didn't listen." Jack didn't respond. Just watched the numbers climb. 38, 39, 40. The elevator slowed. The mechanical hum changed pitch, preparing to stop. Jack reached into his coverall pocket, pulled out the small analog vibration meter, checked it. The needle was steady, waiting. Sophia looked at the device. "What is that? Something that tells the truth?" The elevator stopped. The doors opened. The sound hit them like a physical force. Screaming metal, klaxons, the rotor head spinning out of control, the smell of burning insulation and hot metal and fear. Jack stepped onto the helipad. Everyone turned to look at him. Ray, with his useless iPad. The technicians backed against the far wall. Captain Mills standing 20 feet from the aircraft with her arms crossed and her face carved from stone. And the skyline, shaking itself to death in the center of the helipad. Jack walked toward it. Didn't run. Didn't rush. Just walked with the steady confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was looking at. Ray stepped in front of him. "Porter, you can't just—" Jack looked at him. Said nothing. Just looked. Ray stepped aside. Jack reached the helicopter, knelt beside it, placed both hands on the frame mount, closed his eyes, listened. The vibration traveled through the metal into his palms, up his arms, into his chest, a language older than words. The machine was telling him everything, where it hurt, where it was breaking, what it needed. He opened his eyes, pulled out his vibration meter, held it against the frame. The needle swung violently. 12 hertz, 20 hertz, 24 hertz. Oscillating, unstable. "There," Jack said, quietly, to himself, to the machine, to the metal that had been screaming for help, and finally someone was listening. He looked up at Mills. "How much time?" Mills checked her watch. 30 seconds, maybe 40. Jack nodded, pulled his toolbox toward him with one hand. It had been sitting by the stairwell door. Someone had brought it up. Maybe Sophia, maybe Mills. Didn't matter. He opened it. Inside were his tools, his wrenches, his life. And underneath everything, clipped to the lid, a laminated badge. Project Ghost. Jack Porter, lead structural engineer, security clearance level 5. Everyone on the helipad froze. Ray's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. Sophia stared. Understanding flooding her face. Horror, recognition. Jack didn't look at any of them. Just pulled out a custom torque wrench. Specialized, calibrated. The kind of tool you couldn't buy in any store because it only existed for one purpose. Adjusting grade 5 titanium frame mounts under thermal stress on Ghost-class helicopter platforms. "This aircraft is based on the Ghost 3 platform," Jack said. His voice was calm, matter of fact. "I designed the frame mount. I wrote the stress test protocols. I know every failure point because I built redundancy for all of them." He positioned the wrench on the top mount bolt. "Except thermal shear. That was supposed to be impossible with the titanium alloy I specified. He looked up at Sophia. What alloy did your contractor actually use? Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. Chinese titanium, grade 7. It was 20% cheaper. Jack closed his eyes, breathed once, opened them. Grade 5 or nothing. Grade 7 has a 30% lower shear tolerance, critical thermal expansion at operational temperature. The helicopter shuddered violently. Another bolt snapped. Jack grabbed his wrench. No more time. He crawled under the aircraft, into the kill zone, where the rotor could break free any second and end everything. Mills pressed her radio. 20 seconds, Porter. Jack didn't respond. He was listening to the metal. Part 4. The Revelation. Under the helicopter was heat and noise and the smell of death. The frame mount was inches from Jack's face, glowing, not literally, but hot enough that he could feel it radiating through the air. Hot enough that touching it with bare skin would leave burns. He didn't care. The custom torque wrench fit perfectly on the top mount bolt, designed for this exact purpose, this exact alloy, this exact failure mode. Jack had built this tool 8 years ago. Never thought he'd use it again. His hands positioned the wrench, quarter-inch drive, 45-degree angle, the only position that would access the bolt without damaging the surrounding assembly. 15 seconds, Porter. Mill's voice through the radio clipped to Ray's belt 20 feet away. Distant, tinny, irrelevant. Jack tuned it out, listened instead to the metal. The frame was screaming, a high-frequency keen that meant molecular stress, bonds breaking, structure failing. He applied pressure to the wrench, quarter turn counterclockwise. The bolt resisted, seized. Thermal expansion had locked it in place. The very problem he was trying to fix was preventing him from fixing it. Jack closed his eyes, breathed, adjusted his grip, 2 millimeters to the left, changed the angle, felt for the sweet spot where leverage and geometry aligned. Tried again. The bolt gave slightly, a micron, a prayer. He turned it, slow, controlled, feeling the resistance in his fingertips, feeling the molecular structure of the titanium alloy realigning, feeling the stress redistribute across the frame. The vibration decreased, fractionally, 24 hertz, 22 hertz, 20 hertz, 10 seconds. Jack's hands were shaking, not from fear, from memory, because he'd done this before, in a different life, in a testing facility 2 hours north of here, when he'd been Dr. Elias Vance and the world had made sense and the woman he loved had still been alive. A flash, sudden, unwanted. Jennifer in a hospital corridor, smiling, holding a paper cup of terrible coffee. Come home early tonight. I miss you. I can't, Jen. We're in the middle of stress testing. You're always in the middle of something. This is important. So am I. Jack's hands froze on the wrench. The helicopter shuddered. Hard, the rotor head dipping, unstable. He forced the memory away, focused, turned the bolt another quarter turn. 18 hertz, 16 hertz. His hand steadied. He switched to the second bolt. Lower mount, harder to access. The threads were damaged. Someone had over-torqued it during installation. Probably Ray, probably following some digital readout instead of listening to the metal. 5 seconds. Jack positioned the wrench. The bolt wouldn't turn. Stripped threads, cross-threaded, fused by heat and stress and 6 years of improper maintenance. 4 seconds. Jack closed his eyes. Not to pray, to listen. The metal was still talking, still telling him where the stress lived, where the flex point was, where the force wanted to go if he'd just let it. He adjusted the wrench, not by measurement, by feel. By 20 years of conversations with machines that spoke a language nobody else understood. 3 seconds. He pulled. The wrench slipped. His knuckles scraped against the frame. Hot metal, skin tearing, blood. He didn't feel it. Repositioned. 2 seconds. Pulled again. The bolt turned. 1 full rotation, then another. The threads catching. Finding purchase. The geometry of the frame shifting. Microscopic. Invisible. But there, the vibration meter needle swung. 14 hertz, 12 hertz, 11 hertz. The screaming stopped, just stopped. The helicopter settled into a smooth idle, the rotor head spinning at exactly the RPM it was designed for. No wobble, no oscillation, no violence. Just the clean mechanical hum of a perfectly balanced machine. Jack lay there under the aircraft, breathing, his shirt soaked through with sweat, his hands bleeding, his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. The warning light on the instrument panel flickered, red, yellow, green. Captain Mills's voice came through the radio, quiet, stunned. All systems nominal, 0 vibration, drive, assembly, reading perfect balance. Silence on the helipad. Jack slid out from under the skyline, sat up, wiped his face with the back of his hand, left a streak of grease and blood across his cheek. Everyone was staring. Ray, with his iPad hanging limp at his side, screen still showing green lights, still insisting everything had been fine all along. The technicians pressed against the far wall. White uniforms, clean hands, eyes wide, Mills standing with her arms crossed. A small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. The smile of someone who'd just watched physics prove her right. Sophia Chen, 10 feet away. Hair falling out of its arrangement. Makeup smudged. Heels in one hand. Looking at Jack like she was seeing him for the first time. Like she was seeing anything clearly for the first time. Jack stood. His legs were shaky. Adrenaline crash beginning. The body's delayed recognition that he'd just been seconds from death. He picked up his wrench, wiped it clean on his rag, put it back in his toolbox with the same careful precision he used for everything. Sophia walked over slowly. "You just..." Her voice trailed off, like she couldn't find words big enough. Jack didn't look at her, just closed his toolbox, snapped the latches, adjusted the preload to compensate for thermal expansion. The actuator will read correctly now, problem solved. In 90 seconds, Jack looked at his watch, the regular one on his other wrist, not the broken one Emma was holding. 84. He started walking toward the elevator, toward Emma, toward home and normal and the life he'd built where he didn't have to do this anymore. "Wait," Sophia's voice. Not a command, a request. Jack stopped, didn't turn around. "Why didn't you tell us?" Sophia asked. "When the warning light first came on, why didn't you say you designed this aircraft?" Jack turned slowly. Looked at her. Really looked at her. She was small without her heels. 5'4" maybe. Trying so hard to take up space through force of will and expensive clothes, and the reputation she'd spent 20 years building. But right now she just looked lost. "I did tell you," Jack said quietly, each word landing like a stone. "I asked for 5 minutes. I told you it was frame resonance. I told you the diagnostic was wrong. But you didn't say you were... I shouldn't have to tell you my resume for you to listen." Sophia flinched, like he'd struck her. Jack took a step closer. Not aggressive, just tired. "The truth doesn't care about credentials. The metal was screaming. You chose not to hear it." He gestured at Ray, at the technicians. at the iPad and the tablets and all the expensive equipment that had been worse than useless. You chose to hear the computer instead of the mechanic, the white uniforms instead of the dirty hands. You chose protocol over physics. His voice didn't rise, didn't need to, and you almost killed everyone here because of it. Sophia opened her mouth, closed it. Nothing she could say would change what had just happened. Jack walked past her. Ray was standing there, blocking the path to the elevator. His face was red, shame and anger mixing into something ugly. "You should have said something sooner," Ray managed. "You should have identified yourself." Jack stopped, looked at him. "I did. You called security." Ray had no response to that. Jack continued toward the elevator, his toolbox in one hand, his other hand leaving small drops of blood on the concrete from his scraped knuckles. Mills caught up with him before he reached the door. "Porter." He turned. She held out her hand. "Thank you. You didn't just save the aircraft, you saved lives." Jack shook her hand. Her grip was firm, honest. "You were right not to fly," he said. "Trust that instinct, always." Mills nodded. Then she looked back at Ray, at Sophia, at the cluster of people who'd built a system designed to ignore expertise. "I'm putting this in my report," Mills said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Everything. The warning, the dismissal, the reboot, the failure, and who actually fixed it. Ray went pale. Sophia said nothing, just stood there watching Jack walk away. The elevator doors opened. Jack stepped inside, hit the button for 5. As the doors closed, he saw Sophia still standing there, on the helipad, surrounded by her helicopter and her team and all the certainty she'd built her life on. Looking like someone who'd just realized the foundation was made of sand. Emma was at the conference table drawing when Jack walked into the executive lounge. The room was all glass and leather and expensive art. Floor-to-ceiling windows showing the Houston skyline. A wet bar, a coffee station with an espresso machine that probably cost more than Jack's truck. Emma had ignored all of it. She'd found the art supplies, construction paper and crayons and markers, spread them across the massive mahogany table like she owned the place. Sophia's assistant Jennifer sat nearby, watching Emma with a mixture of confusion and fascination, like she'd never seen a child in this space before. She probably hadn't. "Daddy!" Emma jumped up, ran to him, wrapped her arms around his legs. Jack knelt down, hugged her, felt her small heartbeat against his chest, real, safe, here. "The bird okay?" she asked. "Yeah, baby. Bird's okay. I knew you could fix it." Jack pulled back, looked at her. "How'd you know?" Emma held up his broken watch, the one she'd been carrying, the one that had stopped at 3:47 6 years ago. "Because you're good at fixing broken things." Jack's throat tightened. He took the watch from her, looked at it, at the frozen time, at the reminder of everything he'd lost and everything he'd chosen since. Emma went back to her drawing. Jack followed, sat in one of the leather chairs. Too expensive, too clean. He left grease marks on the armrests. Didn't care. "What are you drawing?" Emma pushed the paper toward him. It was the skyline, but different now. No X's for eyes, no crack underneath. Instead, she'd drawn it with a smile, with hearts around it, with Jack standing beside it. Tiny figure with a wrench, and wings. She'd drawn wings on him. "Why wings?" Jack asked softly. Emma shrugged, the easy wisdom of children. "Because you saved it. That's what angels do. Jack stared at the drawing. The door to the lounge opened. Sophia walked in. She'd put her heels back on, tried to reassemble her appearance, but her hair was still falling, her makeup still smudged, the cracks showing through the polish. She looked at Jennifer. "Give us the room, please." The assistant left quickly, grateful to escape whatever was about to happen. Sophia walked to the table, looked at Emma's drawing. "That's beautiful," she said, genuine, no corporate smoothness. Emma looked up at her. "Daddy fixed your bird." "I know. He's very good at fixing things." Sophia sat down across from Jack, removed her heels again, set them on the floor beside her chair. For a long moment nobody spoke. Emma sensed the adult tension, the weight of unspoken things. She slid off her chair. "I'm going to get water from the fancy fountain." She walked to the far end of the lounge where a water cooler stood, too far to hear clearly, but close enough to be safe. Sophia watched her go, then looked at Jack. "I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything. I was doing my job. Your job is floor maintenance on small aircraft." Jack met her eyes. "My job is keeping people safe." Sophia nodded slowly, like she was hearing something she'd never understood before. "Why did you leave Project Ghost?" Jack was quiet for a moment. His hands were on the table. Bloody knuckles. Grease under the nails. The hands of someone who worked for a living. "Why do you think—" "The records are sealed, but I know there was an incident, a civilian contractor accident. After that, you resigned." Jack looked out the window. At the city. At the afternoon sun turning everything gold. "My wife," he said quietly. "Her name was Jennifer. She was coming to visit me at the testing facility, taking a civilian transport because it was cheaper than flying commercial." He paused, breathed. "The transport company used grade 7 titanium on a load-bearing frame. I'd specified grade 5 in all the military contracts. They wanted to save cost. 2.1% margin increase." Sophia's face went pale. She was beginning to understand. The frame failed. Catastrophically, at altitude. 12 people died. Jack turned back to face her. "I spent my entire career designing systems that couldn't fail. Perfect specifications. Redundant safety measures. Everything engineered to save lives." His voice was steady, but underneath was an ocean of grief. "And the civilian world ignored every specification I wrote because it was cheaper to cut corners. Because 2% profit was worth more than 12 lives." He touched his broken watch, still sitting on the table between them. Her watch stopped at 3:47, the exact moment of impact. Sophia didn't say anything. What could she say? Jack continued. "After that, I couldn't design anymore. Couldn't be part of a system where balance sheets override safety, where the people making decisions never touch the metal, never feel the vibration, never hear the scream of a failure in progress." He gestured around the expensive lounge. The leather, the glass, the distance from reality. "So I became a mechanic, a floor guy, someone who gets his hands dirty, someone who knows." "But you gave up everything." Jack looked at Emma across the room, watching them, waiting. "I gained everything." He stood up, walked to Emma, took her hand. "I leave at 3:15 every day. I'm home by 3:30. I make her dinner, help with homework, read bedtime stories, tuck her in." He looked back at Sophia. "I'm there, present, every single day. Jennifer never got to see Emma grow up, so I make damn sure I do." Sophia sat very still, like she was being shown a mirror and didn't like what she saw. "Today you asked me for 5 minutes," Jack said. But I asked you first. Remember when the warning light came on, I asked for 5 minutes to check the frame. Sophia nodded, barely. And you said no. You said you didn't have time for guesses. Jack's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 6 years of grief and anger and deliberate choice. It wasn't a guess. It was the truth. But you didn't want to hear truth from a man with grease on his hands, from someone without the right credentials or the right title or the right uniform. He picked up his toolbox. You almost died today. Your crew almost died. That helicopter almost killed everyone on that rooftop, not because of the metal, not because of the design, but because you created a system where only certain voices matter. Sophia's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to hide it. You're right. Jack stopped, surprised. What? You're absolutely right. Sophia stood, walked to the window, stared out at her city, her empire, the glass tower she'd built from nothing. My father was a manufacturer in Taiwan, built his fortune through efficiency, speed, ruthless optimization. Her voice was distant, remembering. He told me, hesitation is weakness, doubt is failure. Listen only to data, never to feelings. So that's what I did. Built a company on his principles. Never slow down, never question, never listen to anyone who can't prove their value with numbers. She turned back to Jack. I almost died today because I refused to doubt, because I wouldn't listen, because I built a machine that only trusts other machines. Jack said nothing, just waited. How many other warnings have I ignored? Sophia asked. The question seemed directed at herself. How many other mechanics like you have tried to tell me something and been silenced by Ray, or the system, or the assumption that credentials matter more than competence? She looked at Emma, at the drawing on the table, at the little girl who'd drawn her father with wings. I don't want to be the person who values polish over truth, who values speed over safety, who would rather trust a computer than the human being who actually knows. She walked back to the table, sat down. I want to offer you a position. Jack shook his head. No, you haven't heard the terms. Don't need to. Sophia continued anyway, because that's what she did. Pressed forward even when the door was closed. Chief Safety Officer, your own team. Direct access to me. No chain of command. No filters. Flexible hours, 3:15 every day. Guaranteed in writing. She looked at Emma. Your daughter can have an office here. Art supplies, books, whatever she needs. Private space. Safe. Back to Jack. Salary, name it. Whatever number makes this worth your time. Jack set his toolbox down. Looked at Sophia. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? Jack pulled out his old Project Ghost badge, looked at it, at the photo of a younger man who'd believed the system could work if you were just smart enough. I want every mechanic on your floor to have direct access to report safety concerns. No chain of command. No Ray filtering information. If someone sees something wrong, they can report it directly to you or the pilot. No retaliation. No overstepping protocol. Sophia pulled out her phone, started taking notes. Done. I want mandatory physical inspections before every executive flight. No relying solely on diagnostics. Human eyes, human hands, human judgment. Done. I want any mechanic who raises a safety flag to be protected. No firings, no demotions, no quiet removal. If someone speaks up, they're thanked, and their concern is investigated, period. Done. What else? Jack looked at her carefully. I want quarterly audits of all materials, every supplier, every alloy, every specification. If a contract says grade 5 titanium, I want independent lab verification that it's not grade 7. Sophia stopped writing, looked up. "For Jennifer," she said softly. "For everyone." A long silence. The sun was setting, golden light flooding through the windows, turning everything warm, soft, almost beautiful. "I'll do all of it," Sophia said finally. "I'll write it into the company charter, make it policy, binding. But Jack," she leaned forward, "I need someone to lead it. Not manage. Lead. Someone who understands why it matters. Why a warning light is more important than a meeting. Why listening to a mechanic can save lives. Find someone else. There is no one else." Jack was quiet. Sophia pressed on. "You're the only person who's ever stood in my office and told me I was wrong. Who saved my life and asked for nothing. Who built a tool 8 years ago that saved 90 people today. I don't want to design. I don't want to be part of. I'm not asking you to design. I'm asking you to protect, to teach, to make sure that the rays of the world never silence the mechanics who actually know." She stood, walked to where Emma was drawing again, pretending not to listen but hearing everything. 3:15. Every day, written in stone. You work school hours. You leave when she leaves. Back to Jack. And maybe someday when she's older, she'll want to follow you onto that hangar floor. Learn what you know. See what you see. Jack looked at Emma. She wants to be an artist. Sophia smiled, small, real. Even better. Artists see what others miss, just like her father. Emma looked up from her drawing. "Daddy, can I come to work with you sometimes?" Jack knelt beside her. "Would you want that? Yeah, I like watching you fix things. And the hangar's pretty. All the metal sounds like music." Jack closed his eyes. When he opened them, Sophia was watching. Waiting. "Contract ends if you ever override a safety call for profit," he said. "Deal. I keep my locker on the floor. I'm not sitting in an office full time. Deal. And I'm not wearing a suit." Sophia laughed, actually laughed. The first genuine sound he'd heard from her all day. Thank God. She held out her hand. Jack looked at it, clean, manicured, soft. He looked at his own. Bloody, scarred, grease embedded in every line. He shook her hand. "When can you start?" she asked. "Monday, 3:15 pickup. Remember, wouldn't dream of changing it." Jack picked up his toolbox, took Emma's hand, started toward the elevator. At the door, he turned back. Sophia was still standing there, holding his old Project Ghost badge, looking at the photo of the man he used to be. "Ms. Chen, Sophia, please. Sophia, one more thing. Anything. Fire ray." Sophia nodded slowly, already planning on it. The elevator doors closed. Jack and Emma descended, floor by floor, leaving behind the glass tower and the leather furniture and the world of expensive mistakes. Emma squeezed his hand. "Are you going to work with the fancy lady now? Maybe baby. Maybe. She seems nice, scared, but nice." Jack smiled. "Yeah, she does." The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. They walked out into the parking lot, into the heat, into the normal world where trucks got dented and tools got dirty and fathers came home at 3:30. Jack lifted Emma into her car seat, checked the straps. Through the windshield he could see the top of the building, the helipad, the skyline sitting there. Silent, fixed, waiting, no longer screaming. Finally, someone had listened. Jack started the truck, pointed it toward home. Emma was humming in the back seat. And for the first time in 6 years, Jack Porter wasn't wearing his broken watch. He'd left it on the conference table. Time to stop carrying that moment. Time to build something new. Part 5, Redemption. 6 months later. The hangar floor looked different. Not physically. The same concrete. The same overhead lights. The same smell of aviation fuel and coffee and honest work. But something had shifted. Something in the air. The way people moved, the way they spoke, the way they listened. Tommy was training 3 new apprentices near Bay 4. Young kids, fresh out of technical school, eager, nervous, their coveralls still stiff and new. Forget what the screen says for a minute, Tommy was saying. He had one hand on a helicopter's landing gear, eyes closed. Feel it, the metal talks if you listen. One of the apprentices looked skeptical. The diagnostic computer can detect vibrations at 0.01 hertz. Human hands can't. Tommy opened his eyes. The computer can detect what it's programmed to look for. Your hands can detect what's actually wrong. There's a difference. He glanced across the hangar. Jack was visible in the distance, working on a commercial aircraft, surrounded by a group of engineers, all of them in coveralls, all of them with their hands dirty. "See him," Tommy said. "That's Jack Porter, best mechanic in the building. Maybe the state, maybe anywhere." The apprentices looked. "He doesn't look that special," one said. Tommy smiled. 6 months ago, he saved 90 people's lives with an 84-second fix that all our computers said was impossible. Now he's teaching every engineer in this company how to actually listen. He turned back to the landing gear. "So when I tell you to close your eyes and feel the metal, I'm not being philosophical. I'm teaching you how to stay alive." The apprentices closed their eyes, started listening. In the executive suite on the 40th floor, Sophia Chen sat in a meeting that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Her conference table was full. Ray Mitchell was gone, replaced by Marcus Webb, former Navy mechanic, 25 years experience, zero tolerance for protocol that superseded physics. Captain Mills was there, permanent seat. Her voice carried weight now, equal to any executive. And Jack, not at the head of the table. He'd refused that, sat in the middle instead, still in his coveralls, still with grease under his nails, his toolbox on the floor beside his chair. Emma sat in the corner, drawing, always drawing. The room had been modified, a small desk, art supplies, bookshelves. She was comfortable here now, part of the landscape. Sophia was presenting quarterly safety reports. "Incident reports are up 40%, she said. Marcus started to speak, concerned. Sophia held up a hand. "That's good news. Reports are up because people feel safe reporting. Before the Porter protocol mechanics stayed silent because they feared retaliation. Now they speak. We investigate. We fix problems before they become catastrophes." She clicked to the next slide. "Actual safety incidents are down 62%. No major failures, no groundings, no close calls, because we're listening before the metal starts screaming." Jack was quiet, watching. He rarely spoke in these meetings, didn't need to. His presence was the message. Sophia continued. "We've implemented mandatory quarterly material audits. Every supplier, every alloy. We've already identified 3 contractors using substandard materials. All contracts terminated." She looked at Jack. He nodded once, small, satisfied. "The Porter Protocol has been adopted by 4 other aviation companies. The FAA is considering making it industry standard. We're not just changing Helios, we're changing the industry." After the meeting, Sophia stayed back. Everyone else filtered out, except Jack and Emma. "Walk with me," Sophia asked. Jack stood, took Emma's hand. They followed Sophia out to the elevator. Up to the helipad. It was morning, cool. The Houston sun hadn't hit full strength yet. The Skyline sat on the pad, quiet, waiting. Jack walked over to it, placed his hand on the frame mount, the one he'd fixed 6 months ago, the one that had almost killed everyone. It was cool under his palm, stable, perfect. "I fly twice a week now," Sophia said. She was standing beside him, looking at the aircraft. Denver, New York, sometimes Dallas. Never a single warning light, never a moment of doubt. She looked at him. "Because you taught us how to maintain it properly, how to listen, how to respect the machine instead of just using it." Jack checked his watch. The new one, not broken, just regular, functional, 10:17 a.m. "I need to get back to the floor," he said. "Emma has art class at 11. "In the building." "Yeah, you said I could use conference room B. I said you could use anything you need." Jack smiled. Small. Real. "Conference room B is enough." They walked back toward the elevator. Emma was humming, drawing in her sketchbook as she walked, not looking where she was going, trusting Jack to guide her. "Jack," Sophia said. He stopped. "Thank you. For saying yes. For teaching us. For not giving up on people who didn't deserve another chance." Jack looked at her. At the woman who'd dismissed him 6 months ago, who'd valued credentials over competence, who'd almost died because she wouldn't listen. She was different now. Softer, somehow. More human. She still wore expensive suits and carried herself with authority, but there was something else underneath. Humility, hard-earned, real. "You're welcome," he said simply. Emma tugged his hand. "Daddy, can I show Sophia my picture?" "Sure, baby." Emma held up her sketchbook. The current page showed the helipad, the skyline, and 3 figures, Jack, Sophia, Emma, standing together, all smiling. No cracks underneath. No X's for eyes. Just a helicopter at rest. Safe, whole. "That's beautiful, Emma," Sophia said. "We're friends now," Emma explained. "Simple, true. Daddy says you learn to listen. That's important." Sophia knelt down, eye level with Emma. "Your daddy is the smartest person I know, and you're the second smartest." Emma giggled. "I'm only 7. Smart doesn't care about age." They went back inside, down to the hangar floor, back to work, back to the rhythm of metal and tools and people who knew the difference between data and truth. 1 year after the incident, Jack Porter stood in a place he'd never expected to be. On stage, the National Aviation Safety Conference, Dallas Convention Center, 3,000 people in the audience, engineers, executives, government officials, FAA administrators, press. Jack was terrified. He stood behind the podium in his coveralls, clean ones, Emma had insisted, but still coveralls, still the same boots he wore on the hangar floor, still the same man. Sophia was beside him. She'd done most of the talking, explained the Porter protocol, showed the data, demonstrated the results. Now she was holding up something, Jack's custom torque wrench, the one he'd used to save the skyline, the one he'd built 8 years ago for a project most people in this room had never heard of. "This tool saved 90 lives last year," Sophia said. Her voice carried through the massive hall. "Not because it's expensive, not because it's high-tech, but because the man holding it listened to what the metal was saying." She set the wrench down gently on the podium, like it was sacred. "In our industry, we worship innovation, new technology, better computers, faster diagnostics, and those things matter. But they don't matter more than human expertise, then experience, then the mechanic on the hangar floor who's been listening to machines his entire life. She turned to Jack. "This is Jack Porter. He's the reason I'm alive. The reason Helios Aviation has become the safest company in the industry. The reason we're partnering with the FAA to make the Porter Protocol a regulatory requirement." Applause, loud, sustained. Jack stood frozen. Hating this, hating the attention, hating that 3,000 people were looking at him instead of at their machines where the real truth lived. But he understood why he was here. Because change required visibility, required someone to stand up and say the quiet part loud, required proof that listening mattered more than hierarchy. Sophia stepped back, gave him the microphone. Jack looked out at the sea of faces, engineers, mechanics, executives in suits, people who made decisions about metal they'd never touched. He thought about Jennifer, about the transport that had fallen from the sky because someone had valued profit over her life. He thought about Emma, sitting in the front row right now, drawing, always drawing. Her future safer because people were finally listening. He spoke. "I'm not good at speeches. I'm a mechanic. I fix things. That's what I know." His voice was quiet, but the room was silent, everyone leaning forward. "A year ago, I tried to warn someone about a problem. They didn't listen. Not because they were stupid, not because they were malicious, but because I didn't have the right credentials, the right title, the right uniform." He looked down at his coveralls. "I was just a floor guy, and floor guys don't get listened to." He paused. "But floor guys know things. We know what metal sounds like when it's happy, when it's stressed, when it's dying. We know because we touch it every day, feel it, listen to it. We have conversations with machines that most people will never understand." He picked up the torque wrench. "This tool isn't special. I made it in my garage, cost maybe $40 in materials, but it worked because I understood what it needed to do. Because I'd spent 20 years learning the language of titanium and stress and thermal expansion." He set it back down. "The Porter Protocol isn't complicated. It's just one rule. Listen to the people who know, regardless of their title, regardless of their credentials. If a mechanic says something's wrong, investigate. Don't dismiss. Don't override. Don't trust your computer more than you trust human expertise." He looked directly at the executives in the front rows. "Your diagnostic systems are amazing, but they only see what they're programmed to see. Your mechanics see everything. The crack you didn't know to look for, the vibration the sensor can't detect, the warning sign that doesn't fit the algorithm." His voice got quieter. "A year ago, 12 people died because someone substituted a cheaper material. My wife was one of them. She died because profit mattered more than specifications. Because someone assumed the engineer who wrote those specifications was being too careful, too expensive, too cautious." The room was absolutely silent. "I wasn't being too careful. I was being exactly careful enough, and when the civilian world ignored what I specified, people died." He looked at Sophia. "A year ago, Sophia Chen almost died for the same reason. Different failure. Same cause. The system valued speed and hierarchy and digital certainty over human knowledge." Back to the audience. "Don't let that be your company. Don't let that be your aircraft. Don't let profit or protocol or pride stop you from listening when someone tells you the metal is screaming." He stepped back from the microphone. The applause started slow, then built, then became something else, a standing ovation, 3,000 people on their feet. Jack hated it. But Emma was clapping in the front row, smiling at him with that gap-toothed grin, proud of her daddy. So he stood there, accepted it, because sometimes visibility mattered. Sometimes you had to be uncomfortable so that other people could be safe. After the conference, Jack and Emma walked through the Dallas Convention Center toward the exit. Sophia had stayed behind. Networking, making connections, turning the Porter Protocol into something bigger than one company. That was her gift. Amplification, taking a good idea and scaling it. Jack's gift was different, smaller, more specific. He fixed things. Emma was holding his hand, skipping slightly, happy. "You did good, Daddy." "Thanks, baby." "All those people listened." "Yeah, they did. Because you told the truth." Jack smiled. "That's all I know how to do." They reached the parking lot, found Jack's truck. Same dented door, same worn seats, same reliable engine that started on the second try. Jack lifted Emma into her car seat, checked the straps, once, twice, 3 times. "Daddy, I'm not going to float away." "I know." But he checked them again anyway. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, sat there for a moment. His phone buzzed. Text from Sophia. "FAA wants to meet next month. They're making it official. National standard. You changed everything." Jack read it. Put the phone down. He hadn't changed everything. He'd just reminded people of something they should have known all along. "Listen." "Daddy," Emma said from the back seat. "Yeah, baby. Can we go home now?" Jack looked at his watch. 2:45 p.m. Plenty of time. "Yeah, kiddo, let's go home." He backed out of the parking space, pointed the truck toward Houston, toward their small house with the swing set in the backyard, toward the normal life he'd built, the one where he was home every day at 3:30, where dinner was at 6, where bedtime stories were sacred, where presence mattered more than prestige. The highway stretched ahead, open, clear. Emma was humming in the back seat, and Jack Porter, who'd once been doctor, Elias Vance, who'd once designed machines that could defy physics, who'd once believed that credentials mattered more than competence, drove toward home. He'd learned the hardest way possible that truth didn't live in offices or algorithms or expensive suits. Truth lived in the metal, in the hands that touched it, in the ears that listened, and in the quiet voices that dared to speak when everyone else had stopped paying attention. 6 years ago, he'd walked away from a system that valued profit over people. 1 year ago, he'd walked back into that system and changed it. Not by force, not by credentials, but by doing what he'd always done, listening, fixing what was broken, and refusing to be silent when the metal started to scream. The sun was setting, turning the Texas sky orange and pink and gold. Emma's humming filled the truck, and somewhere behind them in hangars and helipad and airports across the country, mechanics were being listened to for the first time, because one man had insisted that dirty hands and decades of experience mattered more than any diagnostic computer ever built. Because sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one telling the truth. And if you're willing to listen, that voice can save everything. If you believe stories like this matter, if you think expertise should be valued over credentials, and if you've ever been dismissed for knowing something others didn't want to hear, leave a comment. Share this story. Let's change how we listen. One person at a time. Subscribe for more stories about the people who fix what's broken and speak truth when everyone else stays silent.